Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you once again for joining me. We are returning to the AWA Remco 1985 Series 2 review. Series 1, we did look at 4 tag team sets. Well, 3 tag team sets with 1 main eventer. And in this video, we're going to look at 2 more main eventers, competitors, and then we're going to also look at 2 more tag team sets, as well as their loose figures. Now, I don't have accessories for all the loose figures, but it should still be pretty decent. At least you'll kind of see what the bodies look like. Kind of like what I did with the Galoob videos. The first video really provided a lot more information, and then the second video I kind of talked about the figures themselves. I feel like I'm going to pretty much do the same thing with this video. I did give a lot of back history, a lot of information, I guess, for AWA's history, or at least a good chunk of it. Not a good chunk of it, but a lot of good information in the video one. So I kind of feel like there's not really too much more to add going into this video. So we are going to look at the carded figures as well as the loose figures. And it'll be my second video today. If depending on how long the video goes, I really want to knock out all 5 series today, but with each video hovering around 30 minutes, it's going to be kind of hard to do so, but we'll see how it plays out. If I can knock out 2 series, I'll be good with that. Alright, so first tag team we're going to be looking at is the Gagne Raiders. So, a couple things I really love about this. Obviously, being in the Army myself, I'm really going to gravitate towards the BDU colored camouflage uniforms that they got on, which is awesome. 2 special things about this. For starters, well, before I get into that, I hate the stickers. I already mentioned that in the last video. I like the ring and the little emblem that they give you, but when they started transitioning to stickers, that sucks. But one is the introduction of Curt Hennig. So, what I find interesting about this package, when you actually look at the spelling of his name, Curt Hennig, no, Curt Hennig, N-I-G, not N-I-N-G, so that's a typo over his name. And so that's, obviously introduction of who I know as Mr. Perfect, and of course that little spelling error, which is awesome. Greg Gagne gets his second figure in 2 series. We saw him with Jim Brunzell in Series 1 among the High Flyers, 2 of my absolute favorite figures among the line, and then put him in this military getup, keeping with the whole war theme going strong. So, in 1980s, you got a lot of really big name. I don't want a big name, but that's obviously a big scheme that they got going on with Sergeant Slaughter. He wasn't just, he was like a mega star in AWA before moving over to WWF, and of course later on for G.I. Joe. In the 1980s with WWF, you had Corporal Kirshner, who's kind of like your replacement for Sergeant Slaughter when he left the company. AWA came out with their own soldiers with the Gagne Raiders. Hearing a lot of people talk about, because I never saw this tag team myself, obviously, way too young to have seen them, but hearing others talk about their memories and whatnot, they kind of felt like Greg Gagne just simply was not in a position where he was comfortable enough to kind of portray this character. And I don't think it lasted long anyways. Kind of reading up on it, I think it only lasts like 6 months or whatnot, 3 months. I mean, a very short time period. But they got a couple figures, and they're awesome. Now, the problem with my loose figures, no accessories. But it does kind of give you, like I said, more in-depth of what the figures look like. As you can see, very common, no difference. Bodies will pretty much always be the same for the most part with these figures. You're going to find some flabby bodies here and there, some differences, but very minuscule changes overall. Size and everything is pretty much the same. Hands will generally be around the same, very slight differences. Maybe a Baron von Rashke might with the open hand, but again, very few changes. The only mega change you're going to find with these figures are the head sculpts, and kind of like squishy heads, which is pretty cool. as I mentioned last video, I'm buying up a lot of Remco customs, and I think Remco's might actually be some of the easiest figures to customize. So it's just about getting the right head sculpt or head for that particular figure. I've never actually tried popping the heads off these things, but I mean, you have to assume it's got to be relatively easy, right? But these feel like they're pretty tight on there. Kurt Hennig and Greg Gagne. And as I mentioned before, Greg Gagne, son of Vern Gagne, owner, promoter, 10-time AWA champion, incredible history overall as a promoter and owner of the company. Just his longevity as both a collegiate and an Olympic athlete made him a perfect a participant for the AWA, especially when they finally moved out of the realm or the umbrella of NWA. So, but Greg Gagne obviously did not have that same talent as his father. That's okay. They'll survive. Two awesome figures. And then we move on to the Long Riders. So it's always very popular. There's some things that are always constant in wrestling. You seem to always have like these Native American type wrestlers. You always seem to have like these cowboys type wrestlers, and or in this case, more like bikers than cowboys. But I mean, they could go either way. I kind of think about Billy and Bart Gunn as cowboys, but obviously they weren't the first tag team like that, and Billy and Bart Gunn were actually called Long Riders as well. So that got me thinking about them. But biker / cowboy type wrestlers, that was the predominant, and military type wrestlers. So there's always a kind of scheme that wrestling promotions always kind of gravitate towards. I don't know anything about these characters, unfortunately. So you got Wild Bill Irwin, who is this guy, and then you got Scott Irwin, or Scott Hogg Irwin, who is Scott Hogg Irwin, this guy right here. Awesome pieces. Again, I don't have any history. I don't know anything to talk about in reference to these guys, unfortunately. Just kind of looking at the package, man. I've talked about it when I was looking at the back of the Series 2 Galoob figures, tag team sets, where they had championship belts, and they were talking about like the 14-inch figures. There's just so much incredible stuff to find on the back of these packages. So I've got a few different rings. So I've got 2 loose rings, and there was a third ring, AWA ring, that I purchased still in its original package. I never took that ring out of the package, to be honest. I only bought that ring because I wanted the box. So I got 3 rings. 2 of them are up. 1 is still in its original package. With the rings, I have one that's with the base of it is like cardboard, and another one where it's like hardwood wooden base. So at first I thought, because I know that I've heard that the cardboard is an actual ring for the AWA Remcos, and then it's got like that little cloth canvas and whatnot. But and I'll talk about it when I get to that part of it. But I think that wooden base, I thought it was a custom, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's actually part of the steel cage ring. I think that's why the base is obviously different. But that is, what is that, a Kmart sticker or something? Yeah, it looks like, actually I can't tell. Yeah, that could be Kmart. $6.92. Well, sure beats that clearance sticker I saw for $1 on one of the last figures that I did in the last video. So just really awesome. And these aren't complete either, so at least I got an original jacket here. And I think at one point I had this in inside out, and I think I might have put it inside out again. Whatever, it's fine. This is actually a Rick Martel top. When I bought the figure, this actually came with it, so the top. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I was going to put it on Rick Martel, but I've got several Rick Martel figures with his top on, so I really don't need it. At least it gives him some kind of cloth to kind of match up the best I can. And of course, no sunglasses or hats or anything, so figures are not complete, but, they still look nice. I don't know if these guys made it out of the first round. Obviously, when I did my favorite tag team tournament, each line had their own battles. LJN against LJN, Hasbro against Hasbro. The first 2 rounds, and then round 3, all the rounds merged. And even though they're among my favorite tag team set among Remcos, depending on who they face, I don't think they made it out. I just don't recall. Yeah, that is Long Riders. Alright, so a must-have for any collector of Remco or AWA wrestlers or whatnot is the Larry Zabisco and Ric Flair main event. So we looked at the 2 tag teams, and now the last 2 packages are going to be main eventers. I don't know anything about Larry Zabisco. I know the name, it's very common. Again, a mega superstar in the American Wrestling Association. I don't believe I've ever seen him wrestle myself. I don't know if he's ever been a part of any other company. I'm probably sure he went to WWF at some point in his career. Everybody goes to WWF. I don't know if I've ever seen him wrestle, though. It's possible, but I don't have any recollection. Ric Flair. This might actually be my favorite Ric Flair action figure. Here's the funny thing, though. I've always respected Ric Flair's career. I mean, the man, I've heard different numbers. I've heard 16, I've heard 20, I've heard 24. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to say the man was a 20-time heavyweight champion. Okay? Heavyweight champion, I think it was a tag team champion. I've talked about in the past, tag team champion with Razor Ramon as an example. What was that all about? But the man is simply a worker. One of the greatest wrestler in-ring talents that you'd ever find. One of the things I never loved about his character, though, whenever he kind of like felt dazed and confused and kind of out of it, he kind of like did this thing where he kind of like did his face forward flop on the ground, which kind of reminded me of Jim Carrey and his overacting. So that's kind of something that I didn't like about Ric Flair. One of the first things he did when he came into WWF is winning the '92 Royal Rumble. And he really should have been, the first person that they were talking about as far as being, your number one guy winning the whole thing. Shawn Michaels obviously pulled it in 1995 as the number 1 slot, won the whole thing, and then Rey Mysterio, I guess, was number 1 years later. I don't know when. And he won it as well. Number 1 guy and number 2 guy are in the ring for the exact same amount of time. So I just don't understand why they didn't make him as much of a fuss or kind of put Ric Flair in that spot as well. But incredible talent. One of my most hated characters ever. I absolutely despise Ric Flair. Again, absolutely love the professionalism or his accolades and everything. He is literally, he is a wrestling legend. Sure, true enough. Trying to see if there's anything special on the back here. No, not really. You look at your little thumb wrestlers, your championship belt, your belt, thumb wrestlers, ring, and then you got, of course, all your dual wrestlers. Larry Zabisco again. He is one of those guys who Vern Gagne dropped his championship belt to, probably more than once. A very popular wrestler. In fact, I think Larry Zabisco, and I could be remembering this wrong, I think Larry Zabisco was the one that was granted or was put in line to win the championship belt in like the early 1980s. And even though Hulk Hogan was a heel at the time or whatnot, he was actually a huge fan favorite in the NWA. And he actually, the way that he kind of put the butts in the seats, and Vern Gagne still didn't want to make him champion. Hulk Hogan said sayonara, went to WWF, and became a mega superstar for WWF. But then what happens in, around 83, I think it was, Rocky 3 came out. Hulk Hogan got this opportunity to participate in a movie, and I guess Vince Sr. didn't like that and kind of cut ties with him because Hulk Hogan obviously doesn't want to give up a movie role, regardless of how small the part is. And you got the Hulk Hogan Rocky 3 Remco figure, which is awesome. And so Hogan had to return to AWA, and again, kind of what I just mentioned, they just weren't putting him over. Vince Jr. brought him back, and the rest is history. Superstar in the WWF, ended up defeating the Sheik, become champion. You really do have all of these massive legends of the AWA, and I talked about it in the last video with Dusty Rhodes and Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, probably three of the biggest names in professional wrestling, period. I absolutely love the robe with the Ric Flair figure, just so awesome. And I always appreciate every time that they put the RF Ric Flair on the trunks. The robe is like one of my favorite accessories for the figure. I mean, it's the hair and everything, not 100% Ric Flair, but again, considering it's the early to mid 1980s, for this time period, yeah, these figures look pretty close to your everyday wrestler, your real life live action wrestler. The last piece we're going to look at is, again, we talked about in the last video, per usual, is another repeat of Rick Martel and Baron von Rashke. In Series 1, we saw Baron von Rashke on this side. In Series 2 re-release, they moved him on this side. That is literally the only difference. And I'm trying to look at the back over there. Just kind of step up a bit. So, Series 1, Series 2. And, I mean, as far as the front, back of the card, everything remains the same. Trying to look at the card, and even the front of the card, everything looks identical. There doesn't appear to be any changes. So, Series 1, Series 2. Not anything really I could say more about this figure, or these figures, that I haven't already said in the first video. And I do have these figures twice on my loose shelf over here. Baron von Rashke, 50-something-year-old man in the 80s when these guys were coming out. One of the best figures. Superstar for AWA. Probably wouldn't have done much had he gone to another promotion like later on, WCW, WWF, whatnot. I don't think he would have gotten over quite as well. Again, territories, fans are familiar with their guys. And Baron von Rashke, part of the Minnesota-based AWA for God knows how long. Rick Martel, he really was a beloved character in AWA. Moved to WWF and kept that beloved character going for years. And when they made him heel and made him the model, even as a hated guy, as a bad guy, he was still, an elite wrestler and one of the best. He actually, in the WWF, I think it was 92, I want to say? Maybe it was 91. I can't remember all the years. They all kind of bleeding together. I kind of remember Ted DiBiase kind of being in the Royal Rumble for 50 minutes or something. And maybe it was the 1990 Royal Rumble. And then the following year, I think Rick Martel came in, so probably 91 Rumble, I'm guessing. And he came in for 57 minutes or 59 minutes, something crazy. And at the time, had the longest in-ring appearance for Royal Rumble match. It might be a very simple figure, and here's the thing. I talk about loving my playability, play poses with the action figures. These actually stand okay by themselves. I do have low AWA Remco stands that I use for these guys to keep them standing, but they probably, if you did put them loose, they do stand on their own pretty well. This right here is all you needed for your figures, and if you wanted to move the legs, you probably could, but as you can see, they don't move a lot, but probably just enough, you know. That's why, as a wrestlable, or why do I keep using that word, wrestlable? As a playable wrestling figure, it is one of the most elite or most enjoyable figures to use. Hasbro is definitely fun to play with. LJ and Remco. I'm kind of looking at the guys in front of me, even thumb wrestlers. I mean, I really got to give them more credit than I've ever given them in the past. They're playable figures. But when you start getting into these late 90s or mid 90s to, you know, today, the modern day figures, where all these figures where the wrist goes every which way, the elbows bend, the shoulders go every which way, the legs go up and down. No, all that movable joints and stuff, that stuff's not for me. It never has been, never will be. Beautiful action figure overall. So, I really wish I had more information for this video. I don't, unfortunately, but that is what we have for Series 2, and I think I'm actually going to stay down here and do Series 3 as well. So, at least I'll have not. So that'll give me 3 videos in queue. All right, folks. As always, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your support, and let me know what you think in the comments. I will respond per usual, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye, everybody.